Welcome to this explainer. Today we have a seriously fascinating journey ahead of us. We're going to be exploring the intricate concepts laid out in Kevin W. Hector's Christianity as a Way of Life. I am genuinely excited to unpack this with you today, mainly because it fundamentally reframes how we think about the habits and, the everyday systems that actually shape our existence. So, I want to start by asking you a really direct question. What are you devoted to? Just take a second and actually think about it. Is it your career? Your family, maybe a particular cause, or even a hobby? We toss the word devotion around all the time, right? But as we're about to see, it has a much, much deeper structural impact on who we are than we probably realize. According to Hector's framework, devotion isn't just this fleeting feeling or some passive belief you hold. It is the active setting aside of a significant chunk of your life for the sake of a deeply held value. When you're truly devoted to something, it actively organizes your time, your actions, your emotions, and literally your cognition. It determines what you notice when you walk into a crowded room, what you spend your energy worrying about, and what gives you that sense of purpose. It basically becomes the gravitational center of your life's solar system.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with a way of life and the purpose of theology. Then we'll examine the obstacle of sin through three distinct lenses: disordered love, misplaced trust, and systemic sin.
All right, Section 1, Practicing a Way of Life.
Hector argues that adopting this way of life is fundamentally about rewiring ourselves. Think about how an expert copy editor is trained to spot grammatical errors. They literally cannot help but see the typos, even in a casual text message. Well, to build that kind of spiritual muscle memory, the text outlines three tangible sets of practices. First, practices of being reoriented to God, like corporate singing. Second, practices of being in the world. This includes prayer, wonder, and interestingly, laughter, which actually acts as a practice that refuses to take the world too seriously. And third, practices of being with others, like active forgiveness. So if those are the practices, how do we actually measure if we're doing them right?
That brings us to Section 2, the purpose of theology. A lot of the time, we think of theology as this exclusive, super academic ritual reserved for scholars and dusty libraries. But the source material here radically redefines it. Theology is presented as the universal human practice of reflecting on our devotions to achieve understanding and wisdom. So whenever you reflect on your own life to make sure your daily actions match your ultimate values, you are essentially practicing a form of theology. It's a highly practical tool for self-correction. But what exactly happens when our devotions go off track?
Let's look at Section 3, Augustine on disordered love.
Augustine provides this absolutely fascinating analogy. Just imagine we're exiles, right? And we're trying to get back to our homeland by boat. But along the way, we become so captivated by the journey, the ocean views, maybe the buffet on deck, that we fall completely in love with the ship itself. We become converted to enjoying the vehicle that we were merely supposed to be using to reach our final destination. And this brilliantly illustrates Augustine's core distinction between use, which he called uti, and enjoyment, which he called frui. Use means caring for something as a means to an end. Enjoyment, on the other hand, is clinging to something lovingly for its own sake. Augustine defines sin not necessarily as loving bad things, but as having a disordered love. You aren't doing something wrong by using the boat. The error is treating the boat as your final destination. But hey, if Augustine focuses on what we love, where do we place our trust? Let's transition to Section 4, Luther on misplaced trust. Ask yourself this: where do you find your reassurance? When you feel deeply worried, vulnerable, or just anxious about your future, what is the very first thing you mentally lean on to tell yourself that everything is going to be okay? Is it your bank account? Your social network? Maybe your own ability to control a situation? For Luther, whatever you entrust your ultimate concerns to is essentially functioning as your god or your idol. A classic example he uses is mammon, or wealth. Now, the text clarifies a really important nuance here. Think of it like this: if a friend promises to get you backstage at a concert, and later a stage manager hands you a backstage pass, you don't refuse the pass by claiming you only trust your friend. The pass is just the indirect fulfillment of your friend's promise. Trusting the world becomes an idol only when we trust it instead of an ultimate transcendent source, rather than seeing it as a provision. But how does this play out on a larger societal level? Moving to Section 5, Bias as Systemic Sin. Sociologists and theologians like James Cohen and Rosemary Rodford Ruther break this systemic bias down into 4 logical steps. Step 1. Human brains are naturally wired to make rapid associations just to survive. Step 2. We mistakenly apply this associative mechanism to complex groups of people, which generates stereotypes. Step 3, we attach subjective rankings to these groups, deciding some are better than others. And finally, Step 4, these evaluative associations actually manifest in the real world as discriminatory treatment and social walls against those who don't fit the dominant norms. Cohn and Ruther argue that when a dominant group takes its own specific cultural norms and treats them as the absolute, universal measure of human worth, it creates systemic sin. Neutrally speaking, treating one group's culture as the default acts as a profoundly distorting lens. It strips away individuality and makes it incredibly difficult to see marginalized persons as equal. Judging the ultimate worth of a human being based on worldly group norms is, according to this framework, a profound form of worldliness.
So the crucial point is this. When we look at these three distinct lenses side by side, a really powerful unified pattern emerges. Augustine warned against treating worldly things as our ultimate end. Luther warned against using worldly things as our ultimate reassurance, and Cohn and Ruther warned against using worldly norms as our ultimate measure of human worth. Across all three of these perspectives, the core issue of the way of the world is taking something temporary, finite, and worldly and treating it as if it were absolute and ultimate.
We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, looking at how the practices we adopt shape our devotions and how easily those devotions can become misplaced through disordered love, misplaced trust, or systemic bias. So I want to leave you with one final thought to reflect on as you go about your day. Based on your actual habits, your worries, and the way you measure success, what do you treat as ultimate in your own life? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.